When he says pragmatism, I'm just not interested, he's misguided, isn't he?
But I was frustrated last season because we were repeating the same mistakes time and time again. It was refreshing to see someone come in and play attacking football. But when the results started to go against Spurs, we still make the same mistakes. And game management is diabolical on him at Spurs. The manager's not doing it from the touchline. One of the players has to take control.
And he said 2 weeks ago, Alex Crook, that if Spurs were 10th at Christmas, there would be a lot of scrutiny around his position. They're 11th, it's 2 weeks before Christmas, and they've got Liverpool before then.
But there is a cycle at Tottenham. They've had winning managers. Antonio Conte is a winning manager. Jose Mourinho was a winning manager. Pochettino took them to the Champions League final and got fired. Ultimately, Daniel Levy is a chairman who sacks his managers. That should be a worry for Postecoglou. But nothing is going to change all the time that the Levy culture is there.
The recruitment has not been sufficient enough to be able to give Postecoglou the tools that he needs to play his football and play it on a regular basis. And if you look back at the history of Tottenham's recruitment, all of it is to do with how to maximise the assets. How can we buy someone at this price and sell them for this price? You know, how can we make money rather than develop a team that can go on and win trophies?
Are Spurs going to finish in the top four under this manager? No. Are they going to win a trophy under this manager? Highly unlikely. Do I think Postecoglou is the answer to Tottenham's unquenchable thirst for success? No, I don't. But I think the problem goes deeper than him.
Hello, yes, it's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, Terry Gibson and Alex Crook. What a bonkers weekend we've had of Premier League action. Merseyside derby postponed, City slump continues. United lose to Forest at home and then sack Dan Ashworth. Arsenal drop points, Spurs collapse against Chelsea. Big Ange says pragmatism. I'm just not interested, mate. I'll tell you why you should be very, very soon. Gentlemen, just give me one sentence that sums up the Premier League weekend.
The coldest weekend of the year so far, and very frosty for Guardiola, for Postecoglou, and for Dan Ashworth.
Interesting. Tez?
I'm going to go with one word: blusterous.
Oh, I like it. Very good. Okay, let's get some hot air flowing then and get stuck into the weekend, starting at Tottenham Hotspur, where the Premier League weekend was definitely shining its spotlight. Well, first of all, let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? Because yes, Spurs are entertaining. Yes, they keep you on the edge of your seat. Yes, he's a highly decorated coach, and I know he knows more about football than me, Crook, Terry, everybody put together. But let's get a little bit real. When he says pragmatism, I'm just not interested, he's misguided, isn't he? And this is why. I'll give you a couple of reasons. Guardiola, Mourinho, Conte, Deschamps, Klopp, especially in the cup finals against Chelsea, Arteta to win the FA Cup, his first major trophy and only one to date at Arsenal. All of those managers and coaches, Terry, have won a Class A title. Ange has not. And that will always be the case if he doesn't tweak, adjust, and sort of adapt to the game state, right?
Yeah, and it would be easy to jump on board the bandwagon of Postecoglou out. I am a Spurs fan. I admit that. It's what I grew up supporting, and my dream was to play for them. But I was frustrated last season because we were repeating the same mistakes time and time again. There was the comment about we don't really focus too much on defending set pieces, and they're not that important. They are. I mean, more so this year than ever, because we're seeing the Arsenal, how effective they can be, attacking-wise and defending. And it was just silly mistakes like that I thought, surely you have to change. You can't, we had that great start to his time at Spurs, and everything looked great. And after the previous managers, where they were accused maybe of not being your typical Spurs managers in terms of the style of play, it was refreshing to see someone come in and play attacking football. But when the results started to go against Spurs, it's been a long time now. where the results have been inconsistent, the form has been inconsistent, we still make the same mistakes. I'm looking at the game yesterday, Sam, and I'm looking at it from a point of view of analysing it, and I'm looking at it and thinking, this is going to be a goal 30, 40, 50 seconds before the goal that Chelsea scored, because I could see exactly what was going to happen. And that's not the one with the penalties. That's open play. I can see mistakes. I can see people that are not in the chain of closing down. So one person goes, he's not backed up. Then they go too late, and Chelsea play out from what was a really dangerous position for them. They play into midfield, they play into the front, and then they get the ball to Cole Palmer. And you think, oh, I could see that was happening. And then you see him dribbling across the face of goal, and you know what's going to happen next. And defence get dragged across because the fullbacks don't know whether they're playing fullbacks or midfield or tucking in alongside the centre-backs, and plenty of space for Enzo Fernandez to score. I saw that 45 seconds before the goal happened.
Okay, in which case, I take it back what I said at the top of the show. Ange Postecoglou doesn't know as much about football as Terry Gibson, because he spots the problems and Ange Postecoglou clearly doesn't. 1 win in 7 for Spurs. And he said 2 weeks ago, Alex Crook, that if Spurs were 10th at Christmas, there would be a lot of scrutiny around his position. They're 11th. It's 2 weeks before Christmas, and they've got Liverpool before then.
Yeah, and they've got Rangers in the Europa League on Thursday, which is a tricky game, particularly with Van der Ven and Romero both not able to finish the game on Sunday. They were gambles that clearly didn't pay off. They go to Southampton live on the talkSPORT network next Sunday. You'll remember it was after a game at Southampton that Antonio Conte had his meltdown that ultimately spelt the end of his tenure. I understand the clamour for a change of manager. I'm not the biggest Postecoglou advocate. I don't particularly warm to him as a person. I don't think he's this master manager that he was made out to be at the start of last season. I think if you take away his first 2 months in charge, he's actually got a very poor win percentage, and I take on board all of Terry's points. But there is a cycle at Tottenham. They've had winning managers. Antonio Conte is a winning manager. Jose Mourinho was a winning manager who was sacked days before a cup final. Pochettino took them to the Champions League final and got fired. Ultimately, Daniel Levy is a chairman who sacks his managers. That should be a worry for Postecoglou. But nothing is going to change all the time that the Levy culture is there. And you look at the game yesterday, I'm not necessarily sure it was purely Postecoglou's tactics that killed Tottenham's hopes of victory. If you look at what he had at his disposal, there was a reason he had to rush back the 2 centre-backs. He clearly doesn't trust Radu Dragic. I think Archie Gray would have had to play at centre-back, and I feel sorry for him because he's played everywhere but in midfield this season. But he's bringing kids off the bench to try and change the course of a game against probably the most informed team in the country. So again, I think you have to look at the ownership and what do they actually want? Because this is not a club who win trophies.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpick there. And Alex is right. The recruitment has not been sufficient enough to be able to give Postecoglou the tools that he needs to play his football and play it on a regular basis. They've added games because they qualified for Europe this season. They didn't have that last year. They needed extra experience in the squad. They did get Dominic Solanke, but they spent over £100 million on teenagers for the future. And if you look back at the history of Tottenham's recruitment, all of it is to do with how to maximise the assets. How can we buy someone at this price and sell them for this price? You know, how can we make money rather than develop a team that can go on and win trophies? That's always been Levy's modus operandi. That said, I don't think it does completely excuse the tactics yesterday, Terry, actually, because I watched the game back last night and I was watching Moises Caicedo drift into midfield from right back and add an extra number in the middle of the park. And I thought, where is the Tottenham midfield? And for a long time in that game, until he upended Caicedo, I didn't even remember that Yves Bissouma was playing.
Yeah, and the shame is when Bissouma and Sarr first started playing under Postecoglou together, they were formidable, and their poor form has coincided with the poor run of form since that first 2 or 3 months under Postecoglou. But when they started playing, you looked at them and thought, these two are fantastic. These are 2 really good buys. I think in Levy's defence, he likes to buy players with not so much a resale value in terms of selling them, but as an asset value. So he likes to buy young. So Bergvall and Archie Gray this year are the perfect examples of that, which I don't mind. I don't think Spurs supporters in general minds buying for the future because, you know, we aren't Man City. We aren't, you know, the big clubs that go out and spend absolute fortunes, Man United, Man City, the list of Chelsea. So I think we're realistic, the Spurs fans, about that, and we like young players coming through. So if it's buying reasonable, young players for reasonable prices, that isn't the case. That isn't a problem. But I think in general, as I said earlier, I just think the same mistakes are made time and time again. And tactically during a game, you want to be inspired by your manager. You want to see your manager. I'm not a big fan of managers that rant and rave, that are running up and down the touchline and get involved every 2 minutes and pointing out every move, every kick, every controller.
But did he adapt when it was going against them?
No.
That's one of the key things. You go 2-0 up in a game. At that point, I think you have to go, right, okay, just take stock here. Let's not allow them to get back into the game, especially before half-time. Did he do that? Did he see the problems developing like you did before they came about?
Never does it. He never does it. And game management is diabolical on him at Spurs. I've been to quite a lot of games in the last year or so, particularly since he's been manager. And you can see playing out the back short goal kicks when you're 1-0 up, 2 minutes before half-time, giving a corner away. And you think, we had a goal kick with 2 minutes before the half-time break. Someone take control. If the manager's not doing it from the touchline, one of the players has to take control and go, no, let's go into half-time with a 1-goal lead. Let's keep the clean sheet. No, let's play at the back. Let's play in the 6-yard box. And, we've given the ball away in midfield. There's a fear about playing the ball into the opposing half of the pitch that is just astonishing. And we end up giving a corner away, and we're not very good at defending corners. I'm scratching my head thinking, where is the game management in this from Spurs?
Well, we said during the game, we were sitting high up at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It was brilliant, by the way. The entertainment value was high. If you're a neutral, you're absolutely loving being at that game. If you're a Chelsea fan, you're loving being at that game as well. And one of the moments that I sort of pointed out to Crook was, I said, if Chelsea want to score another goal in this game, they might as well give Tottenham a corner, because they were so exposed on the counter-attack from corners. It was unreal. I mean, listen, maybe we're all completely wrong, and I'm prepared to give Ange the benefit of the doubt. I know Crook's being nice to him now because they had a little bit of a make-up down in the tunnel last night, and he's been slagging him off for 6 months, but now they're best friends.
No, not at all. Not at all. We
and
didn't have a make-up.
They're sharing Dolly Parton records or something, and Kenny Rogers. I don't know. But are we all going to be proved wrong, Crook? Is he a genius?
No.
Or is he the Aussie Ardiles?
You nicked that one off me, or I certainly paved the foundations last night. But yeah, very good. Listen, I've said it a couple of times. Are Spurs going to finish in the top 4 under this manager? No. They couldn't do it last season when United and Chelsea took a year off. It isn't going to happen. Are they going to win a trophy under this manager? Highly unlikely. They're in the last 8 of the EFL Cup. As a Manchester United fan, if we can't go there and win, we don't deserve to win the trophy. Same in the Europa League. So do I think Postecoglou is the answer to Tottenham's unquenchable thirst for success? No, I don't. But I think the problem goes deeper than him. And, this is not me changing tact on Postecoglou. I've been quite consistent. I never bought into the hype. I still don't. I just don't feel the need to kick him out when he's clearly down. And that's another problem, by the way. His demeanour in post-match interviews after a defeat, I'm told, is repeated on the training ground. He's a very solitary figure, doesn't really mix with the players or his existing coaching staff. And I think that's an issue as well. When you're in this spiral of negativity, as Tottenham clearly are, his personality, unusual actually for an Australian, is not the type to get them back on the right track and get that positivity around the place.
I mean, let's just have it right. Not every single Australian is a very happy person walking around going, "G'day, mate. Anyone want to have a barbecue down my place?" It doesn't really happen like that. Okay, they're not a homogenous group. They're not all the same.
As a nation, they are.
That's a little bit of stereotyping going on there. Back page of the Sun today in the UK. Blue, are you kidding? Enzo Maresco says that they're not contenders for the title, but are they? He says, we are not ready. And why would a manager play it down so much, Terry?
A lot of reasons, and I get it. I understand, Tony, because it raises the expectation levels, which are now impossible to stop. Because people are looking at it and thinking, maybe this week was the turning point when they're 2-0 down to, unfortunate circumstances from Cucurella, but they came back and they won it comfortably. By half-time, you're looking at them probably thinking, and Paul Mercer on Sky wasn't the only one thinking it, that, oh no, Chelsea win this. And it was 2-1 at the time. So I think there's now the expectation levels from everybody, not just Chelsea fans, have rightly grown, and they should do. I mean, Chelsea bought a lot of very, very good players, and we all joked about too many, and it's a mess. And Maresca has done a fantastic job in trimming it, cutting it, pretty much repeating the same group of players week in, week out. I know he alternates with the European games, but that's the sensible thing to do. Their reserves will probably win that competition, and it's a good example of ignoring the outside noise from a manager that came from a club whose supporters were glad to see him go. And now we see Leicester supporters are glad to see every manager go. You kind of, when he came, you thought, well, they're glad to see him go. There must be something wrong with him. But Leicester supporters are showing that they're glad to see every manager go. And he's gone about his business quietly, with no fuss, with a lot of common sense. And he's managed to knit together a group of highly talented players that cost an absolute fortune, but they're expensive because they're good. And they're possibly the best player in the division in Cole Palmer. I mean, along with Mohamed Salah, they're the two standout players this season in the Premier League.
I mean, when you go back over the course of the calendar year, 2024 has been his year, hasn't it? He's been absolutely terrific. I mean, he's broken Yaya Touré's record for penalty success as well. 12 penalties in the Premier League. He scored every single one. And the way he broke the record was just basically Cole Palmer, wasn't it? Stepping up, little Panenka, have some of that, walk off. I'll just calm this situation down. I mean, he is a hilarious character. His post-match interviews, pre-match interviews, I mean, they're monosyllabic, but he is very good at sort of just dripping in a little bit of gold during those discussions as well. And yeah, all the laugh and joke about the fantasy Premier League captains needing him or managers needing him to boost their scores, all that kind of stuff. It plays into the narrative that he's actually very in touch with the football public. And I kind of love that about him. I'm one of these sort of people, especially a Chelsea fan who doesn't get too attached to the players and the managers anymore because they change so much, and I've been around it too much. But you can't help but love this fella. He is something special, Crook.
Yeah, and I'd love to get Pep Guardiola's honest appraisal of the decision to move him on, especially at a time when Kevin De Bruyne is struggling for fitness, and we think his City career might be coming to an end. They had an heir apparent, and Pep didn't fancy him. Let's be honest about it. It was Guardiola's call, and I think he's regretting it. And I saw him in the tunnel afterwards, actually, with his Man of the Match award, Cole Palmer. And he just seems like such a down-to-earth kid who just loves playing football. He's a little bit like Wayne Rooney in that respect, in that he's a street footballer, isn't he? He's sort of, he's not your methodical modern-day footballer. He plays on the cuff. He's a maverick. And I think we saw that with that penalty. And Chelsea's success certainly is a lot down to him. I think we're also starting to see a player in Enzo Fernandez who's been a bit maligned, isn't he? Probably mainly because of the transfer fee and that incident in the summer. But he seems to have really found his feet in the Premier League. I still worry about them defensively and with the goalkeeper, who I don't think covered himself in glory, certainly with the first goal and maybe for the second as well. But they are, at this moment in time, the team who look most likely to give Liverpool a title fight, whether Maresca admits it or not. And I wonder if he's doing a bit of a Claudio Ranieri on us, because Ranieri would never admit it when Leicester won the league, would he, that they were contenders? And maybe that's Maresca's mentor in that respect.
I think there's a slight difference between Leicester winning the league in 2016 and Chelsea having spent £1 billion winning the league in 2024. But I get what you're saying. He played it down, didn't he, Ranieri? As did Brendan Rodgers, actually, the year that Liverpool went incredibly close to doing it right to the very end, but that didn't end in victory. I think genuinely he believes that they aren't ready to win the title, and I don't believe they're ready to win the title either. Having watched them, I think defensively, as you've mentioned, they've got serious problems, actually. Come up against a really good ruthless side and they'll end up losing. If you look at the defeats they have suffered this year, it's no surprise to me that it's Arsenal, Liverpool and Manchester City that have beaten them over the course of the last 3 games they've lost have come against those teams. But what about the situation that evolved right at the beginning of the game with Mark Cucurella falling over twice? I don't know if he was wearing ice skates, rollerblades, or what he was doing, but he was literally all over the shop. And then he changed his boots. I mean, Troy Deeney sort of pointed out on Match of the Day too that there wasn't much difference between the boots But actually, there was a massive difference in his performance once he changed it, Terry. So they must have had some impact.
It sums up his Chelsea career, doesn't it? He was ridiculed. He was unfancied. People didn't want him. Chelsea supporters didn't like him. And then a year or two later, everyone's looking at him and thinking, "Oh yeah, no, he's a good player." Yesterday, it was comical. I mean, it really was. And you know, I'd looked at his boots that he changed, and I thought they look the same. There doesn't look much difference between those two pairs of boots. It was comical how he looked around at the kit man and blamed him for choosing.
Poor old Ricky standing on the touchline going, I'm just giving you the boots you asked for.
Exactly. And he was shaking. Ray Cooker was gesturing to the wolves, the bench, as if, you make me wear these boots. And he changes the boots, and then his game was very much like his career. He made errors, made 2 mistakes that were costly. And then for the rest of the game, he was marvellous. He was impeccable. And to have that spirit, that character, that personality, I've known him for a long time. That's the type of player he is. But to react in the positive manner he did, I saw Maresca laughing at the end of the game as the pair of them walked off the pitch, because ultimately,
you can do that when you've won.
Exactly, it didn't cost them, but it's something that it's difficult, you know. When I look at the pitches, and I've been on some of these pitches, it's difficult to know what stuff to wear that is suitable for the job, because the pitches are so short, they're so hard. They're not like the old days where you had 2 or 3 inches of mud, so you had a stud that was as long as possible, so you got you some grip. Then maybe if it was a bit tougher, a bit harder, you wore mouldy boots. Now it's difficult for players to get the right choice. He made the wrong choice, obviously. The second pair suited him better, but it's not an easy one not an easy decision to make. But you hope at his age, with his experience, that you don't make that mistake.
And the conditions were absolutely appalling yesterday. The rain was swirling around. The wind was going around Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So it wasn't necessarily the same during the warm-up as it was during the game too. Okay, let's talk about the title race aside from Chelsea, because the other big winners this weekend were Liverpool. They didn't even kick a ball, and the rest might have come at just the right time after that rather taxing game against Newcastle and ahead of a Champions League trip to Girona. What could they expect when they get there, Terry?
Oh, it's going to be tough. I mean, there's Girona are not in good form. They're hit and miss. They're actually doing better than we expected, because they sold their best players. They've had injury issues. They've somehow managed to retain a position that's mid-table in the league, which is healthy. And then every now and again, they came up against the Real Madrid team at the weekend and totally outclassed them. So this is where Girona should be. Mid-table. Last season was ridiculous. They're struggling in the Champions League, and they'll struggle in this game as well. And they don't have much hope of qualifying for the next stages of it. I'd be massively surprised if Girona get anything from this game. But as I say, we're talking about a Girona team that has only had about 3 or 4 seasons in the top flight of Spanish football, and in one of those, they qualified in the top 4 with this remarkable season they had last year. But the new players they brought in are not as good as the ones that they sold, and that's been the problem for the coach, Michel.
Okay, Arsenal dropping points away at Fulham. Never going to be an easy game, because I think Fulham have been superb this season, and Marco Silva has proved himself an astute tactician. But a lot will go back to that disallowed goal right at the very end when Martinelli is marginally offside, Crook.
Yeah, but there's no controversy about it because he is offside.
But the controversy is that he shouldn't be, right?
Well, exactly. There's a few former players who waded into him and really called him unprofessional for getting himself in that situation, because he is quick enough not to be caught offside. And I'm sure he got a bit of a telling off in the dressing room afterwards. But ultimately, again, it's Arsenal maybe not being ruthless enough, maybe being too reliant on those set-piece goals. I mean, they're so good at set pieces. I guess the question you have to ask is their reliance on that starting to have an impact on their play for the rest of the game, and their open play. Are they too reliant on the set-piece playbook at this moment in time?
23 corner goals over the last year and a bit, and it's more than anybody else. And I did put on my sheet of paper here, are they over-reliant on set plays? So if we're all thinking it's likely to be the case. And they started to get into that sort of situation where they think, well, if we can't break down a team like Fulham, then we can use a set play to do so. I thought Fulham defended those corners in particular absolutely superbly, Terry.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you spend 100 million on a player and he can take a decent corner. That should be the case, shouldn't it? I mean, Saka's a fantastic player. He takes a fantastic corner. I played for a team who I think
I don't think they really bought Declan Rice just for that. But you know,
no,
I mean, it's a good asset, right?
it comes with a package, but their set piece takers are the delivery is something special. I played for a team that one season scored 80% of their goals from set pieces, 80% from Wimbledon. And I know what it's like to have that belief that every time you get a set piece, long throws counted for us as a set piece as well. So we had the full package, the long throws, the corners, the free kicks that we worked hours and hours upon. 8 6-foot players attacking the box to attack a set piece. And the fear it instills in teams when you played them, they didn't know whether to give away a corner or to give away a throw-in or to give away a free kick, because they knew when we put the ball down, the ball was going to be delivered on the money by Dennis Wise, and we had the power to score. We really believed, the whole supporters, the whole ground believed every time we got a set piece, you were going to score a goal. And you see that mentality now, that the Arsenal supporters are singing about another goal from a set piece. What I find fascinating, Sam and Alex, is that how has Arteta managed to get this group of players to buy into it? Because the modern day footballer, they're not interested in practicing free kicks for 2 or 3 hours and maybe playing building a game around getting in positions where you win corners and free kicks, which is, I think, is to the detriment of Arsenal. I've always been interested to see how a team would do with fantastic players, which Arsenal have, and playing this style of football. And they do play different now. Talk about Postecoglou not being pragmatic. I was at the North London derby. I'm watching the stuff, and I'm watching the goal kicks, and I'm thinking, this is us. This is Wimbledon. Every player from a goal kick was over in a quarter of the pitch in the attacking half of the pitch. So the centre forwards were pinning the centre backs. The midfielders were looking for knockdowns. The fullbacks and the 2 centre backs were all squeezed in. I'm thinking, there's 20 players in like a 20-metre square bit of field. I haven't seen that. That doesn't happen anymore. So I've always wondered how it would be, how it rocked the boat for everybody if someone played a direct style of football, worked hard on set pieces, but also at the same time have fantastic players. We had good players at Wimbledon. We didn't have fantastic, we didn't have world-class players. But it had an impact, and this is what Arsenal are doing. But are they playing for set pieces? I think they are. Get the ball into the corners, get it out wide, hope you get free kick, hope you get a corner, then all hell breaks loose. Then teams are panicking like mad.
8 6-foot players in your team attacking the ball and set pieces got 80% of your goals. What did you do?
I scored headers. Even I joined in. Because if you think about it, if you're marking...
How tall are you? Just for the people who can't see, how tall are you?
I'm thinking about this because I was 5'4" and I think I might have shrunk. But I daren't measure it anymore. Because if you think about it, who's marking all the big players? All the big players. I would come up against someone who is not much bigger than me, and I could jump. I could anticipate. I knew where it was going to go. If I didn't score direct from one, I'd score from a knockdown and stuff like that. So it was... It does work, but teams don't put enough thought into it. The players don't want to be standing around doing the set pieces for too long, and it's wrong.
Okay, so where does it leave Arsenal in the title race, Crook? Because they've only lost 3 games in all competitions this season, but it is just 1 win in 6 Premier League away matches. Why has that become a real problem for them? Is it because they've become a big scout now, and when a team are at home against a side like Arsenal, they really raise their game and really feel as if that they could, this is almost like their cup final, or is it just a failing on Mikel Arteta's desk that he can't get over the line in these matches against sides that you would expect him to be? I mean, Fulham, let's be honest, a good side, but if you're going to win the title, that's the kind of game that you want to put 3 points down in.
I think it's the lack of goals. Kai Havertz has stopped scoring. Obviously, Martin Odegaard is still finding his way back to fitness. Martinelli, I don't think, is the same player that he was a couple of years ago. So it means they're heavily reliant, really, on that Saka-Odegaard combination, all the goals coming from set pieces. So I think it is an issue. It is one that's going to hold them back. They're brilliant at home. Their record at the Emirates is imperious. I don't think they've lost there all season. But away from home against good sides, and I think the standard of the mid-ranking Premier League teams this season is probably stronger than ever.
Definitely.
You need a little bit more to get over the winning line, and Arsenal don't seem to have that at the moment. And Yeah, I think it could cost them. At the moment, I do see Chelsea as Liverpool's nearest challengers because I think City are probably out of it as well.
That's the thing we've been saying on this programme for the last couple of weeks. In fact, going back, I remember even sort of September, October time, we're saying this is a different Premier League. Do not expect someone to run away with 90 points. Obviously, Liverpool proving us all wrong in the fact that they're dominating the league. But I do think that those mid-ranking teams, going right the way down to, even teams in the bottom half of the table can cause teams in the top half of the table big problems. Look at what Bournemouth have done. Look at what Brentford are doing. Look at what Fulham are doing. Brentford at home, one of the best teams in the league. In fact, the best team in the league at home this season is Brentford. Yeah, they're one of the worst away from homes, but actually at home, they're almost unbeatable. They score a lot of goals and they're fascinatingly
Even
entertaining.
Tottenham, if we're talking about bottom half teams, even Tottenham can cause the big boys problems, can't they?
Yeah, I was laughing when you said mid-table ranking teams. That Man United and Spurs are in that now, is that?
He didn't mention Man United, though, funnily enough, did he? He ignored that, didn't he? We'll get on to them in just a second. Crookmeister, they don't like it, the Arsenal fans. They get their backs right up when you ask them whether or not they need a striker. They get very feisty about that. They get a bit salty, in fact, maybe you could say. It's interesting, actually, you defending Postecoglou as much as you have done today. Kate, the Spurs fan who calls us on a Friday to sort of have a go at Alex for being salty because he's got an agenda apparently against Tottenham. She'll be very pleased to hear that you were coming to their rescue. What do you think about their title challenge then? Is it over, or is that just a very simplistic thing to say at this stage of the season? I think we're in December. No chance that anyone's ruled out just yet. I still think Arsenal are in it. I still think Chelsea are in it. I still think Liverpool are in it. I'd even go as far to say that Manchester City still haven't ruled it out yet.
See, I think City are out of it. They've lost 4 games already this season. I think they lost 6 in the last 2 Premier League seasons combined. And I get what we've been saying about the ability of the smaller sides to cause surprise, but I think they're too far back. I think Arsenal just about are still in it because of that home form, but they do need to find some goals, or they're very quickly going to find Liverpool and probably Chelsea as well over the hills and far away.
Terry?
Yeah, I won't rule Man City out of it. Yeah, I think they have the potential still. I know that it's unlikely, but they played 15 games. We have got a lot of games left. They could not lose a game for the rest of the season and claw their way back into it. We've seen them do it before. It's not going to be as easy as in the past. I think Liverpool are really good. And maybe Man City are not very good. And maybe there are weaknesses in the Man City squad that haven't been there in the past. But if they were to get a run going, and I have to be honest, I thought with the win last week, I thought this might kickstart them, this might get them going, and then they draw again at the Palace. So maybe I'm completely wrong on that, but maybe it's just because of their recent record that you think they're capable of going the rest of the season unbeaten and winning most of them. But they do need some additions in January.
And I think they're going to spend. Right, let's go across Manchester now and talk Manchester United, who arguably are in as big a mess off the pitch as they are on it. Maybe we should just rename this section the Alex Crook section. He did text me on Saturday night after I walked away from Old Trafford saying it wasn't a very good performance in no uncertain terms. And he said, I've got no rant left in me. I've got no rant left in me. Well, let's see about that. United lost to Forest, a limp performance at home. Less than 24 hours later, Dan Ashworth leaves. Crookie, break down the timeline of events and what the issues were.
Well, first and foremost, genuinely, I'm not angry about performances anymore. I'm resigned to it. I couldn't even get angry as they conceded schoolboy goals against Forest. But I am angry about the way INEOS have run the football club, because to me, we're no further forward as an institution than when the Glazers were making all the big decisions. They dithered over the sacking of Erik ten Hag. That cost the club millions of pounds. People who've been there for most of their working lives have paid the price for that in terms of redundancies. Then they spend months and millions of pounds getting Dan Ashworth from Newcastle, supposedly as the overlord of this bright new era. He spends almost as much time on gardening leave as he does actually working for the football club, and he's off again at a big financial burden, just as Sir Jim Ratcliffe has announced that tickets for kids and pensioners are going to cost 66 quid to watch the worst Manchester United team in my lifetime. So I think optically, this is another really bad look. And I don't think it's a lazy narrative to say it suggests that INEOS still don't really know what they're doing. And you look at their other sporting institutions, you've mentioned Nice haven't been particularly successful. Even in the America's Cup, they've not covered themselves in glory. I do worry. Are United actually heading in the right direction? Because they recruited players for a manager they kept faith with in the summer. That cost the club millions as well. The manager's gone, and we don't know if Ruben Amorim really fancies Joshua Zirkzee in particular. My suggestion would be he probably doesn't. And I think that's one of the sticks that's been used to beat Dan Ashworth with. So I find it all utterly bizarre, to be honest. And then you look at the pre-match comments that Ratcliffe gave to Andy Mitten and his fanzine. I think that, the standout line was that it shouldn't be more expensive to watch Fulham than it is to watch Manchester United. That smacks to me of someone who doesn't know his people. He claims to be a Manchester United lifelong supporter. He clearly doesn't know the area, because there's a lot more wealth at Fulham and on the King's Road than there is in Manchester. So I think every big decision that INEOS has made so far has turned out to be a disaster. And, we may as well just erect a circus tent over Old Trafford at the moment with a gift that keeps giving to everybody else.
Well, I mean, they would probably argue that they've been in charge for 11 months, and it takes a long time to assess what's going on in a football club, and certainly a lot longer to turn it round, especially when you've had 2 decades of Glazer rule. And we may well be proved a little bit silly when we look back at what happens in this period from a position of sort of hindsight in 5-10 years' time. But the decisions do appear tone deaf, especially the ones around the tickets. I just do not get that. And I don't think anyone really understands it, because the amount of money that you raise from increasing the ticket prices, and it is only 3% of tickets, but what it does is it sets the tone, and people think, well, okay, so what, a season ticket's going to go up? Season tickets that, by the way, up until now have been relatively well priced and relatively kept at a sensible level, by the way. But he also went on to say during that interview with Andy Mitten, which was brilliant and really wide-ranging, difficult decisions have to be taken, because if you don't take difficult decisions, then nothing will change. And some of those will be unpopular. Whether or not this Ashworth decision is unpopular or not is a different matter. The fact is that, as far as I understand it, this is as much to do with Jim and Dan not being sort of like...
aligned.
Aligned's not the right word. Almost, it's like they don't fit together. What's that word where you sort of get compatible? They're not compatible. Dan is a very sort of nice businessman who tries to get everybody on board and be a little bit corporate and organise. He is, a steady Eddie. And Sir Jim is a maverick. Let's do it. What do we need? Let's go and get it. Let's make it happen. And when he walks into the boardroom and says, "Right, we're going to fire Eric Ten Hag, the little ball genius. We need a replacement. Who are we going for?" Dan will present a range of options and ideas, and whereas Jim wants a name. I want this guy. Who is it? I want that. I need someone with charisma, with a bit of bang for his buck. I want someone to come in and revolutionise the football club. And I'm not sure that Dan sees a modern football club working in that zone. It might be why Lausanne, who they've also bought, have had a lot of managers. These have had a lot of managers. It might be why Lausanne, who were 12 times Swiss champions, were relegated twice on the INEOS watch. But I think it was as much about personality as it was about sort of plans and who wanted to hire who and who didn't want to hire someone. Do you know what I mean? I think there was a lot of sort of personality issues behind the scenes, and he gets on very well with Barada, gets on very well with Wilcox. I'm not sure that Dan fitted in.
Yeah, well, listen, one of the big questions coming out yesterday was why. And actually, I agree with what Gary Neville said on American television. The statement that United put out didn't even attempt to answer that question. I thought it was quite poor, actually. But basically, as I understand it, by the time Dan Ashworth got to the football club, Jason Wilcox, who was supposed to be working under Ashworth as technical director, he got his feet so far under the table. He had that pre-existing relationship with Omar Barada. Those two were basically making the big decisions. And Dan Ashworth, I think, felt very isolated right from the start. I understand his relationship with Sir Dave Brailsford was still quite close up until the end of his tenure. But when it came to changing the manager, he wanted to go in one direction. Gareth Southgate, Eddie Howe, Graham Potter, Thomas Frank were the 4 candidates he had in mind. And obviously, led by Barada, United were really keen to get Ruben Amorim. If you're the sporting director and you don't get a big say, any say in this case, on who the manager's going to be, your position's untenable. So there was no coming back from that with hindsight.
I made a bit of a joke yesterday on the Sunday session, Terry. We were talking about Tim Starton at West Ham, who didn't want Julian Lopetegui. Dan Ashworth, as a sporting director, who didn't get a say in appointing the new manager when Erik ten Hag was sacked. And it did sort of beg the question, if you're an owner with such a big personality, what's the point in employing these people to do these jobs if you're not going to empower them to do them? I can't imagine, as much as I'm sure that Tony Bloom has a massive role, I can't imagine that he completely bypasses David Weir every time he makes a big decision. Otherwise, David Weir wouldn't be there. Do you know what I mean? That club seems to be run in the way. Matthew Benham at Brentford. I know they're different entities. I know that Manchester United is much bigger and all that kind of stuff. But the way that the clubs are run is still the same, isn't it, right? The owner can't just make unilateral decisions and not trust those people that are below him.
Before Terry answers that, I think one of the reasons that he left Newcastle, Dan Ashworth, was that he felt he didn't have enough power there because obviously there were a lot of different strands to the ownership group. I think he was promised at Manchester United that he would have a big overall say, and obviously that didn't happen.
Terry, go.
It's the let's call it a family tree that I look at. I spent a lot of time looking at it yesterday, and Jason Wilcox got a mention there. Who appointed Dan Ashworth originally? And if it wasn't, because surely they must have known that he was going to be compatible with what they wanted, what Jim Ratcliffe wanted. So who appointed him? Who made that choice? It seems to me, I'm looking at the family tree. Ratcliffe. You've got the CEO of INEOS Sport. You've got Dave Bransford, who's the director of sport for INEOS. Then it goes down to Omar Berardi, who's CEO. Then none of them have accepted responsibility for giving Ten Hag the extension on his contract. They've all washed their hands of that, which is often a common trait with directors of football, who can be, in my opinion, charlatans at times, where they claim, "Oh, I was there and I found him and he was my plan. We won that trophy and I was there." And then with the bad mistakes and the sackings of managers and the choice of managers, they disappear. So, but who decided to give Dan Ashworth this job? Jason Wilcox has been a director of football at Southampton for 10 months before getting the job at Manchester United. In my opinion, you should have 10 years of experience before becoming the director of football at Manchester United, not 10 months at Southampton. So the whole thing is laughable. It paints Manchester United in a terrible way. It really does. When you look I couldn't believe, I actually thought it was a hoax yesterday when I saw the news breaking. I thought, this cannot be true. 5 months. They spent 6 months on gardening leave when they wanted him. So surely there must have been a relationship that was maybe before he started thinking, Sir Jim Ratcliffe thinking, he's not my type of personality. We're not going to get on. This isn't going to work. But you'd hope that someone has been so successful as Jim Ratcliffe would know exactly what he's getting when he appoints a person into such an important job at one of the biggest clubs in the world, and he clearly hasn't.
I think it was Brailsford who recommended Dan Ashworth. That was where the pre-existing relationship was, and I think Ratcliffe obviously knew about him and what he'd done at the FA in particular. But the personality clash, as I understand it, was more between Barada and Ashworth, and maybe that's Barada protecting this little inner circle that he's built up with Jason Wilcox. I think there were always too many cooks. That was the problem in the summer. Yeah. Some of the board wanted to fire Ten Hag, some didn't. Some wanted to appoint Thomas Tuchel, some wanted to appoint Kieran McKenna. And again, when they held that performance review, if you remember, during I think the October international break, when again Ten Hag was sort of given a stay of execution, it was because they couldn't unilaterally decide who they wanted to replace him. So I think it is a problem, and for that reason, I don't think that there will be an outside person coming in to replace Dan Ashworth. I think, if anything, Jason Wilcox probably goes up another rung in the ladder, and I totally agree with what you're saying about his lack of experience. They've got Christopher Favell there as a sort of interim recruiter. I think he'll probably get a permanent job, and that will be it. So I don't think we're going to see Dougie Freedman, for example, who is the bookmakers' favourites, come in as director of football.
2016 on an FA panel, I think Sir Dave Brailsford and Dan Ashworth worked together. And Dan Ashworth, as Terry talked about experience and what you need to be the Manchester United technical director, he did West Brom, Brighton, FA, Newcastle, Manchester United. So a guy with more than 20 years experience, I think, in top level football as a director of football, someone as an overlord, someone who was an organizer. So it is interesting that they've decided to shun that and then to go a different route. One thing I think is a big issue at Manchester United is that you've got someone who does a director of negotiations, a director of interim recruitment, a director of elite sport performance, and I haven't even got to Brailsford, Barada, Ashworth, and Wilcox yet. There's such a bloated sense of executive in that football club. Do you really need someone whose job is just to be the negotiator? Not sure.
What's Darren Fletcher's job, by the way? Because he must be the greatest survivor in football.
And how did Manchester United used to work with Sir Alex Ferguson and Davy Gill and scouts that Sir Alex Ferguson trusted?
It does seem a bit of an odd situation, doesn't it? It doesn't seem like the structure is aligned. Oh, we love that word, don't we? Well, maybe it will be very soon. Okay, let's round off by looking at the bottom of the table. Ipswich is still waiting for a home win. Imagine being Kieran McKenna. You're 1-0 up, 4 minutes to go, and all of a sudden you end up losing by 2-1. Their home form, if it continues like this, Terry, will end up seeing them get relegated, won't it? Because they're not going to win 10 games away from home.
That it will. And it's, you look at Ipswich and you think plucky Ipswich, this and that, and Kieran McKenna's done a fantastic job in the last couple of years, and the club has done a fantastic job. They spent 125 million this summer. And you're looking at the players they've bought, they've gone for a certain time. They've gone for players that hadn't spent, if any, time at all in the Premier League. And they'd spent players that have been playing in the Championship. And at the moment after, so they look a Championship club, which is, it's tough because a team that gets consecutive promotions, probably that's going to be what they look like. But perhaps the money hasn't been spent as well as it should have been. Perhaps in that 125 million, which brings in about 8 players, perhaps they should have bought 2 or 3 that have played a couple of 100 games in the Premier League, as opposed to buying young, the best players, maybe in their opinion, from the Championship. So then they look naive, they look fearful now. If they do so much good work, they get themselves ahead. Kieran McKenna's the job he's done is sensational, but they have this fear factor now that when the club's running down and it's only a 1 goal advantage or they're level, they are conceding late goals, and it's going to cost them. You win 1 game so far this season, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, on the other side of that coin are Bournemouth, who have been absolutely brilliant this season. When you think of the victories that they've picked up at home, now winning games away from home as well. Andoni Iraola, who we championed on this podcast 18 months ago when he was given the job because we knew what he'd done in Spain, has done it here in the Premier League as well. And that is a mark of real intelligence, isn't it? Because, we've talked about managers that have come into this league, they've decided on their style of play, and then they've just imposed it with no changes. Andoni Iraola has brought his style of play to the Premier League, but he's also adapted as well. And that's why they've beaten Man City, why they've beaten Arsenal, why they've beaten Tottenham, why they should have beaten Chelsea, why they've gone away and done it as well like they did at the weekend.
Well, they've started to win away. It was a problem early in the season, but they've won their last 2 on the road now. Wolves and Ipswich, albeit teams that, if you're trying to finish in the top half of the table, as I think Bournemouth are this season, you should be beating. But their recruitment has been spot on. We've spoken a lot about recruitment on this podcast. You look at the players like Semenyo, who's come out of the Championship. I really like Milos Kerkez, the left back. I think he's going to end up at one of the biggest clubs in the Premier League or in Europe. Zabani is a decent centre-back as well. And they got the recruitment of the manager right, because you look at the midfield area, how much Lewis Cook and Ryan Christie in particular have improved under Iraola's tutelage, and the fact that Dominic Solanke scored so many goals last season to get himself a move to Spurs, I think is testament to Iraola and his in-game management. Back to Terry's point about Postecoglou, the number of goals that Bournemouth get off the bench. Phil Billing came on and made a big impact yesterday. Enes Unal's made a big impact off the bench. Dongo Watara has come off the bench and got the winner. So everything he touches at the moment, Iraola turns to gold. He's a very humble guy, but they're top half challengers for sure, and they're brilliant to watch, Bournemouth. I love the way they play football.
Still needs a bit of a glow up. Needs a bit of a Graham Potter, doesn't he?
I think he does.
Bit of help.
If the top club are going to notice him, he needs to sell himself a bit more. He's not
and
great at that.
If Alex Crook is telling you that you need a glow up, right? You really need a glow up.
You know what's really interesting, Sam? He's the only when he came to Bournemouth, He brought one assistant, one coach with him, Inigo Perez, who couldn't get a work permit, is now back managing Rayo Vallecano, the club that Iraola managed before. So he's working with everybody. He was happy to work with everybody who was there. Bournemouth is a really interesting club. I spent some time down there last season. Everybody that works around the football club is an ex-player. And, you know, you like Richard Hughes as director of football, who's done such a great job that he's got the Liverpool job. Simon Francis has taken over now. He was working under Richard Hughes. That's why it's a philosophy is in place. And credit to Iraola. He didn't want to get the job and go, right, I'm going to bring in 6 staff and I want this person as director of football. I want this player and I want that player. He's worked in tandem with what the plans the club had. And the one thing I know about Iraola, and it is guaranteed, and I knew it before I spoke to him and had lunch with him, it is every single player. I was talking to him about good players, and his one comment about some of the players was repetitive. Doesn't work hard enough. Doesn't run hard enough. And when you see Bournemouth play, every single player works their socks off, with and without the ball. They're bought into his style of play. I thought he was a great manager, great appointment, and the job he's doing is sensational.
Leicester follow up their midweek win over West Ham by coming back from 2-0 down to draw with Brighton. A really good start for Ruud van Nistelrooy, who's got the presence of a manager. You know, sometimes you sort of speak to managers and they don't carry themselves in that way. We think, how the hell do you inspire everyone? But he's the manager you think, oh, I could play for him. He's got that sort of, I mean, maybe his tactical awareness isn't brilliant, or maybe it is, I don't know. But actually the way he carries himself has this air of authority about him, and he's definitely getting the best out of Jamie Vardy.
Yeah, maybe Leicester have finally got a manager their fans can love and believe in, because I think he's so demonstrative on the touchline, the way he celebrates every goal. I think as a fan, you can't help but warm to him. I'm biased because he was one of my favourite players growing up at Manchester United, but I think, you know, credit to him yesterday. Maybe he's not the best tactician in the world, but he made positive changes off the bench. He went chasing a game that looked lost, and he's got a point out of it. They're 5 points clear of the bottom 3 now, Leicester. I thought they were doomed, to be honest. I thought all 3 promoted teams would go down. I think with Van Nistelrooy in charge and with Vardy fit and firing, I think they've got a chance. I think they've got more than a puncher's chance now of staying up, which is
It's
probably
very Van
bad.
Nistelrooy. He's a legend. Alex said, Man United legend, Real Madrid legend, is an inspiration. He'll certainly know how to get the best out of the strikers, that's for sure.
Yeah, and defences as well, apparently. He spent most of his time as a coach working on defences and making sure defences are well-drilled and that spaces are tight and compact. He's got his job on his hands. Actually, probably that's why he's jettisoned Decoli and Wout fast, to be honest, and brought Connor Cody back into the team because he had a job on his hands trying to get those two to sharpen up. West Ham against Wolves is the 8 o'clock kickoff on Monday night. If you're watching this after that, you know the result already. You must send our best wishes to Mikel Antonio. We haven't got the full details of exactly what's happened to him yet, but we know that he was involved in a serious accident over the weekend, and our thoughts are with him and his family. We'll be live at the London Stadium on Monday evening, Rashman Chowdhury and I, from 7 o'clock. Tuesday night, Girona against Liverpool is live on talkSPORT 2, with Leipzig, Aston Villa following that in the Champions League. We've got Arsenal, Monaco, Juventus against Manchester City. And on Thursday night, Rangers, Tottenham is top of the bill at 8 o'clock. Before that, Manchester United go to Czechia to play Victoria Pilsen. That is my destination, so I'll pack my bags, my thermals. It's going to be -5 in Pilsen on Thursday night. I'm really looking forward to that. So I've got my heated gilet, though, and my big gloves, so I'll be fine, Terry. Don't worry about me. I know you're very worried about me. Don't send the hot water bottle. It's fine, Tez.
I'm in
It's
Barcelona
fine.
next weekend working, so yeah, I do it.
Goodbye, Terry. Goodbye. Croupy, thank you very much.